All right, hello, my friends. It is Earth Day. It is Earth Day. Friday, May 1st is Earth Day. So we're going to have a quick little math lesson. We're going to be comparing fractions, and then I want you to go outside and do something nice to the earth. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our fractions. This is a nice little printout of how we can look at fractions in a different way. So here is our whole, and here is 1/2, 1/2, and 1/2. Here's a third and a third and a third, so 3/3 equals 1 whole, 2 halves equal 1 whole, and then a fourth and a fourth and a fourth and a fourth, so 4/4 equals 1 whole. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be comparing some fractions, okay? And we're going to use this to help us do that. So the first thing we're going to do is I want us to look at 1/4 and 2/3. Okay, so you're going to have to decide which one is bigger, 1/4 or 2/3. Okay, so we have 1/4 right here. So we're just going to kind of shade that in. This will be our 1/4. Now, if we have 2/3, well, how many parts of a third are we going to shade in? We're going to shade in, and just need to pull out a bunch of color pencils. So if we're going to compare 2/3 to 1/4, well, let's shade in. Here's our thirds. Let's shade in 2/3. So here's 2/3 and 1/4. Well, which one is bigger? Well, 2/3. 2/3 is going to be bigger. So there you go. As always, the little one eats the big one. All right, so let's compare 1/5 and 2/10. Okay, let's do it. And I pulled out a bunch more colored pencils. So we're comparing 1/5 and 2/10. So here we have 1/5, and we're comparing that to 2/10. Now, here's something I want you to think about, okay? Here is 2/10. Here's 1, here is 2. All right, if you're to look at this, let's see. It's kind of hard to visually see that. So I'm thinking that those two are equal to each other. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a quick way that we can check that. I wish I had a ruler or something. We'll use our pencil. There you go. So 1/5, I think, is going to be the same as 2/10. So here's how we can check that. Remember we talked about equivalent fractions? Well, let's think about this for a second, okay? If we were to, I'm looking at these numbers, I'm going, okay. I think there's something going on here. So can we say, we multiply that by 2? Remember, defining equivalent fractions, we multiply the numerator and the denominator by one number, and that makes it equivalent. Well, what's 1 times 2? 2. What's 2 times 5? 10. Are these equivalent? They are. They are equal to each other. Okay? So we did a quick check. We said 1 times 2 is 2, and 5 times 2 is 10. Those are equivalent. And if you look at our little number, if I had a ruler, I'd show that a little bit better. But as you can see that these are equivalent. They are the same. 1/5 is equivalent to 2/10. Okay? All right, let's do another one. 1/6 and 1/5. So whenever we're looking at fractions, I mean, for the most part in the math world, usually the bigger number is usually the biggest. But when you have fractions or working with tenths and hundredths, that's not true. So whenever you see 1/6 and 1/5, well, you may think, oh gosh, I bet 1/6 is bigger because, well, that's a 6. And that's a 5, and 6 is bigger than 5. But in the fraction world, that's not true. So here we have 1/5. We've already shaded in our 1/5. Now, so you got to think about this in terms of kind of like space. So here's our 1/5. So let's shade in our 1/6. Our 1/6 is smaller than our 1/5. because it takes the parts of this whole is smaller. It takes 6 parts to make a whole, whereas it takes 5 parts to make a whole. And so it takes fewer parts. It only takes 5 parts to make a whole and 6 parts to make a whole. So in the fraction world, normally this number here on bottom, if it's bigger than the one on top, then it may be a smaller fraction. It may be smaller. So in this case, 1/6 is smaller than 1/5. Okay? So let's look at 1/2 and 3/4. So again, kind of think about this visually. Okay, half is like exactly half. But 3/4, that is 3 parts out of 4. That is almost to a whole. So I'm thinking visually that 3/4 is going to be bigger than 1/2 because you're almost to that whole. You're almost there. So let's look. So here is our 1/2. We're going to shade in 1/2. And we've already shaded in one part of the fourth. So let's shade in 3/4. 1, 2, 3. So here's our half and here's our 3/4. So there that we can see that 3/4 is bigger than 1/2. Okay? So there we go. 1/2 is smaller than 3/4. So let's maybe do a couple of more and then we're moving on outside to Earth Day. Okay, let's try a few more. Here we go. Let's compare. All right, how about 2/6 to 2/10? 2/6 to 2/10, and then we'll do another one. Let's do 1/4 and 2/6. 1/4 and 2/6. Okay, let's compare those. All right, so visually, let's think about this. So, well, for me, it's kind of hard to think because 2 parts out of 10 isn't going to be a whole lot. 2 parts out of 6, I think, is going to be more than 2 parts out of 10 parts. So let's look. So we have 2/6. So here's our 6. I'm going to shade in 2 parts of that. I don't know if that's going to be the same color. It is not. That's okay. So here we are. We're shading in 2/6. So here's our 2/6. And here's our 2/6. So now let's shade in 2/10. Oh, we've already shaded. Oh, there's 2/10 right there. Gosh darn, we've already shaded it in. Okay, so here's our 2/10 and here's our 2/6. Well, obviously, our 2/6 is bigger than 2/10. So we're going to go that way with it. All right, so what about 1/4 and 2/6? So thinking 1 part out of 4, that's not very close to a whole. But we have 2 parts out of 6. I don't know. They may be pretty close. Let's see here. So we have 1/4, which is right here. I'll try to make that a darker color. Oh, it's going to be close to that 5th color. It's okay. So here's our 1/4 colored in. So 1/4 and our 2/6. So where's our 6? Oh, we already have 2/6 shaded in. Okay, so here's our 2/6 shaded in and our 1/4. Well, which one's bigger? They're pretty close. They're getting there. But 2/6 is bigger than 1/4. So, little one eats the big one. And there you go. Let's see if we can find one. Let's make one that might be equivalent. Okay, let's see. Let's make one up on our own. That'll be the last thing we do. So I want you to find an equivalent fraction. We're going to say for 3/6. Okay, we want to find something equivalent to that. Okay, we want this to be equal. We got to make this true. Let's make this statement true. All right, so what are we going to do? You're right. We're going to choose a number and we're going to multiply it. So, pardon me. Let's multiply it by, I'd like to use small numbers because they're just easy to work with. So let's do times 2. Times 2 times 2. So 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 times 2 is 12. Now, here's something that I want you to think about. I need for you to think about something. I need for you to think, you know what? 6 can go into 12. How many times can 6 go into 12? Let's look. How many times can 3 go into 6? 3 can go into 6. 3 is a multiple of 6. Let's see. So here's our dividing line. So any line that lines up with each other are going to be equivalent fractions. Okay? So all equivalent fractions to a half would be a half, and then 2/4 is equivalent to a half. And then 3/6 is equivalent to a half, because here's our 3. 1, 2, 3, or 3 parts out of 6. That is equivalent to a half. Okay? It even goes all the way down to the 12ths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's our little dividing line. If we were to go all the way up, there we go to half. Now, one thing I want you to kind of think about is that look at all of our even numbers. Look at all of our even. So we have 2, and then we have the fourths. Oh, well, those are lining up with the half, and here are 6. Our fifths aren't lining up. Those can't be equivalent fractions. And then we have the eighths. Well, it's lining up too. The 9s aren't. Looky there. I bet you 5/10 equals 1/2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5/10 equals 1/2. The 11ths aren't going to work. It's an odd number. Oh, well, looky there. Our 12ths will be equivalent to a half. How many 12ths do you think that would be? 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6/12 is equivalent to 1/2, as we proved right here. So, now, there. See, now it's true. Okay, so, that is our lesson for today. Okay, I just want you all to think about comparing fractions and maybe try to visually see things like when things are divided up into parts, like 1 part out of 10 is a small number. Well, 1 part out of 2 is pretty big. So a half is going to be bigger than a 10th. So that's what I kind of want you all to think about and to visualize. It is Friday. It is Earth Day. Go outside and run around. Plant some flowers. Pick up some trash. Do something nice for the planet. And in turn, that should probably make you feel pretty good too. All right? Enjoy your Friday. Happy Earth Day. Love you all. Stay safe.